The wind howled across the empty prairie, carrying with it the scent of dust and broken promises. Emma Calloway stood at the edge of the train platform, her gloved hands trembling as she clutched the faded letter that had brought her halfway across the country. The words were still legible despite the creases, seeking a bride of good character. A new life awaits in the West. She had believed those words. She had sold everything, left behind Boston's suffocating propriety, and boarded a train with nothing but a battered trunk and fragile hope. Now, as the merciless sun beat down on Redemption Flats, that hope felt like ash. The station master had delivered the news with all the warmth of a gravedigger. Calloway shot 3 nights ago in a saloon brawl, dead before he hit the floor. Emma stared, her mind refusing the words. Dead. The man who had promised her a home, a future, was gone. The station master shrugged. You'd best catch the next train back east, miss. But there was no next train. Not for 3 days, and Emma had no money left. She had spent everything on the journey, on the trousseau she'd packed, on small luxuries for a husband she would never meet. She stood alone as other passengers dispersed, their curious glances lingering. A woman alone in the West was either a fool or worse. The afternoon stretched into evening, the sky painted in blood and fire. Emma sat on her trunk and wondered what would happen when darkness fell. No hotel would take a woman alone. She had no one to turn to. That was when she saw him. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving like a predator, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black. A wide-brimmed hat cast his face in darkness, but she felt his eyes assessing her. He stopped close enough that she could see the hard line of his jaw, the cruel mouth. "You're the Calloway bride." His voice was rough as gravel. Emma nodded. "He's dead," the man said. "I know," she whispered. He studied her. "You got anywhere to go?" She shook her head. Money for a ticket, another shake. Something like amusement crossed his face, though it held no warmth. Women don't come this far if they got better options. He turned to leave. "Wait," Emma gasped, desperation raw in her voice. "Please, I don't know what to do." He paused and then turned back. "I got a place in the hills. You can stay until you figure things out, but I ain't your husband, your protector, or your savior. You're coming because I got space and you got nowhere, that's it." Emma nodded, though his words chilled her. She followed him to a horse tied nearby. He swung up, then pulled her behind him. "Hold on." She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling hard muscle heat. The horse jolted forward. As they rode into darkness, Emma wondered what kind of man Silas Corian was and what she had agreed to. His words echoed in her mind like a warning she didn't yet understand. The ride took 2 hours through absolute darkness, broken only by a crescent moon. Emma clung to Silas, every muscle aching. She had never been this close to a man in such an intimate position. Weeks ago, it would have scandalized her. Now survival reordered everything. When they arrived, Emma could barely make out the structure in the darkness. A cabin, small and square, with a sagging porch. Silas dismounted and pulled her down without ceremony. Her legs buckled and he caught her arm roughly. "Steady." His grip was iron. Emma gasped at the pressure. "You're hurting me." Silas released her immediately but didn't apologize. "You'll bruise easier than that out here." He grabbed her trunk and carried it inside. The cabin was sparse. A rough table, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, a single bed in the corner. Silas lit a lantern and Emma saw his face clearly for the first time. Hard angles, a scar cutting through one eyebrow, eyes the color of winter storms. He looked at her with something like resignation. "You'll take the bed. I'll sleep out here." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off. "Ain't charity, just sense. You're no good to anyone if you freeze." He moved to the fireplace, building a fire with efficient, practiced movements. Emma stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with herself. When the flames caught, Silas straightened. "There's beans in the cupboard. Coffee, too. Help yourself." He moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. Silas paused. "Got things to check on. Bolt the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." And then he was gone. Emma bolted the door with shaking hands, then sank into one of the chairs. The fire crackled warm and bright, but she felt cold all the way through. What had she done? She was alone in the wilderness with a man she didn't know, a man whose eyes held shadows she couldn't read. But what choice had she had? She made weak coffee and ate beans cold from the tin, too exhausted to heat them. Then she moved to the bed, not even bothering to change out of her travel clothes. She pulled the rough blanket over herself and closed her eyes. She woke to hands on her shoulders, shaking her roughly. Emma screamed, flailing in the darkness. "It's me." Silas's voice cut through her panic. "You were screaming." Emma's breath came in gasps, a nightmare. She'd been back on the platform, watching the train pull away while darkness closed in. Silas's hands were still on her shoulders, his face close to hers in the dim light from the dying fire. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you." Silas studied her for a long moment, then released her and stepped back. "Get used to it. Nightmares are common enough out here." He moved back to his bedroll by the fire. Emma lay back down, her heart still racing. She listened to his breathing, steady and slow, and eventually exhaustion pulled her under again. Morning came cold and bright. Emma woke to find Silas already gone. The fire rebuilt, coffee warming on the stove. She rose stiffly, every muscle protesting, and poured herself a cup. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it cleared her head. She found bread and butter in the cupboard, clearly fresh from town. Silas must have bought them before meeting her at the station. The realization that he'd planned to help her even before speaking to her unsettled Emma in ways she couldn't name. She was washing the tin cup when the door opened. Silas entered carrying an armful of split wood. He glanced at her briefly, then moved to stack it by the fireplace. "There's work needs doing if you're staying," he said without preamble. "I ain't running a charity house." Emma straightened. "What kind of work?" Silas wiped his hands on his pants. "Barn needs mucking. Chickens need feeding. Garden needs weeding. Can you handle that?" Emma lifted her chin. "I can learn." Something almost like approval flickered across his face. "Good, get your shoes on." He led her outside and Emma got her first real look at the homestead in daylight. The cabin sat in a small valley surrounded by rocky hills. There was a barn, weathered but sturdy, a chicken coop, and what might have been a garden once, now overgrown with weeds. It was isolated miles from anything. "How long have you lived here?" Emma asked. Silas didn't look at her. 5 years, give or take. He showed her the barn first. Inside were 2 horses, a cow, and various tools hanging on the walls. The smell was overwhelming, manure and hay and animal sweat. Silas grabbed a pitchfork and handed it to Emma. "Start there." He pointed to a stall thick with soiled hay. Emma took the fork, though it was heavier than she expected. Silas watched her struggle for a moment, then took it back. "Like this." He demonstrated quick, efficient movements, forking the dirty hay into a wheelbarrow. Then he handed it back. "Your turn." Emma's hands were blistered and bleeding by the time she finished the first stall. Silas appeared with a bucket of water and clean rags. "Let me see." Emma hesitated, then held out her hands. Silas took them, his grip firm but careful this time. He cleaned the blisters with rough efficiency, then wrapped her palms in strips of clean cloth. "You'll toughen up," he said. "Or you'll die trying," Emma muttered before she could stop herself. Silas's mouth twitched almost a smile. "Maybe." The days fell into a pattern. Emma woke before dawn, made coffee, started breakfast. Silas taught her to gather eggs without getting pecked, to milk the cow, to weed the garden. Her hands bled and calloused. Her back ached constantly, but slowly she grew stronger. Silas rarely spoke beyond giving instructions, but Emma began to notice things. The way he always positioned himself between her and the door. How he checked the perimeter every night before dark, the rifle he kept within arm's reach at all times. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Emma finally asked, "What are you afraid of?" Silas looked up sharply. "Who says I'm afraid?" Emma met his gaze steadily. "You never relax. You're always watching, always ready." For a long moment, Silas said nothing. Then he stood, moving to the window to stare out into the darkness. "I used to ride with a gang," he said finally, 7 years ago. "We robbed stages, banks, payroll wagons. I was good at it." Emma's breath caught, but she didn't speak. Silas continued. "Then we hit a town. Things went bad. People died, women, children." His voice was flat, empty. "I got out after that, changed my name, came here. But the gang leader, Kane, he don't forget. He don't forgive." Emma stood slowly. "Is he looking for you?" Silas turned to face her. "He's always looking. And if he finds me, anyone with me dies too. That's why you can't stay. It ain't safe." Emma lifted her chin. "Then teach me to fight." Silas stared at her. "What?" Emma's voice was steady despite the fear racing through her. "Teach me to shoot, to defend myself, because I have nowhere else to go and I'm not leaving." Something shifted in Silas's expression. Not quite respect, but close. "You don't know what you're asking." Emma stepped closer. Yes, I do. Teach me. Silas studied her face in the firelight, searching for something. Finally, he nodded once. Tomorrow. We start tomorrow. That night Emma lay awake, listening to the wind howl around the cabin. She had crossed a line, committed herself to this strange, violent life. But for the first time since arriving in the West, she felt something other than fear. She felt purpose. Dawn broke cold and gray. Emma was already dressed when Silas knocked on the door. Time to start. He led her away from the cabin into the hills where sound wouldn't carry. In his hands were 2 revolvers. He handed one to Emma. It was heavier than she expected, cold metal warming slowly against her palm. First rule, Silas said, never point it at anything you don't intend to kill. Emma nodded, her throat dry. Silas showed her how to load it, how to the hammer, how to sight down the barrel. His hands moved with practiced ease, and Emma tried to memorize every movement. Now you try. Emma's hands shook as she attempted to load the cylinder. She dropped 3 bullets before managing to slot them home. Silas watched without comment, though she could feel his eyes on her clumsy movements. When she finally had it loaded, he set up targets. Tin cans on rocks about 20 ft away. Aim for the center. Breathe out as you squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. Emma raised the gun, sighted as he'd shown her, and fired. The recoil jolted her arms and the shot went wide, striking rock 3 ft from the target. Silas stepped behind her, his body close. Your stance is wrong. Spread your feet. His boot nudged hers apart. Straighten your arms, but don't lock them. His hands covered hers, adjusting her grip. Emma's breath caught. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. Smell leather and smoke and something darker. Focus, Silas said, his voice rough near her ear. Emma tried, but all she could focus on was the solid weight of him behind her. The way his breath stirred her hair. I said, focus. His tone sharpened and Emma flinched. Silas stepped back immediately. Try again. This time Emma hit the rock 2 ft from the can. Progress. They practiced until her arms ached and her ears rang from the gunfire. She hit 1 can out of 30 shots. Pitiful, Silas said, but there was no real criticism in his voice. But it's a start. We'll practice every day until you can hit more than you miss. They walked back to the cabin in silence. Emma's mind was churning. The feel of Silas behind her, his hands on hers, had awakened something she didn't understand. It frightened her. He frightened her, but not in the way she'd expected. That afternoon, Silas took her to the barn. Need to move hay bales to the upper loft. He climbed the ladder and Emma followed, her legs still shaky from the morning's exertion. The loft was dim and dusty, filled with stacked bales. Silas began tossing them to the far corner where they'd be dry. Emma tried to help, but the bales were heavy, awkward. She struggled with one, trying to lift it. Silas stepped in without asking, his hands closing over hers on the rough twine. You're trying to muscle it, he said. Use your legs. He demonstrated lifting with his thighs, not his back. But he didn't move away, his chest pressed against her back as he guided her hands under the bale. Emma's breath quickened. Like this, Silas murmured, and they lifted together. The bale rose easily and they carried it to the corner. But when they set it down, Silas didn't step back. Emma turned, and suddenly they were face to face, inches apart. For a long moment, neither moved. Emma could see the pulse beating in Silas's throat, see the way his jaw clenched. His eyes were locked on hers, and she saw something raw there, something hungry. Emma, he said, and her name was almost a warning. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe both of them. His hand came up to cup her jaw, rough and calloused, and Emma leaned into the touch without thinking. His thumb brushed her lower lip and she gasped. The sound seemed to break something in him. Silas's hand tightened, not quite painful but firm, pulling her closer. You should go back to the cabin, he said, but his voice was, you should stay away from me. Emma's heart hammered. Why? His eyes darkened. Because I'm not a good man. Because I take what I want. Because he stopped, his grip loosening. Because force is all I have left. Emma reached up, covering his hand with hers. Then teach me about force. Silas stared at her like she'd struck him. Then suddenly his mouth was on hers, hard and demanding. Emma gasped against his lips, her hands clutching his shirt. This wasn't the gentle kiss she'd imagined in girlish dreams. This was raw, almost brutal. His teeth caught her lower lip and she whimpered, not entirely from pain. The sound made him pull back sharply. Did I hurt you? His voice was rough, but there was concern there too. Emma touched her lip, felt it already swelling. Yes, she admitted. Silas's expression shuddered. I told you I ain't gentle, he turned away. Go back to the cabin. But Emma didn't move. You're hurting me, she said quietly. Silas went still. Leaving hurts, Emma continued. Pretending this isn't happening hurts. Whatever this is, Silas looked back at her over his shoulder. This is a mistake, Emma lifted her chin. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly, but a kind of resignation. You don't understand what you're asking for. Emma stepped closer. Then show me. Silas turned fully and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. I warned you. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him. This time the kiss was slower but no less intense. His hands slid up her back, tangling in her hair. Emma's fingers found the buttons of his shirt, working them open. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Silas rested his forehead against hers. This don't change anything, he said. I'm still leaving when spring comes, still running from Cain. You can't be part of that. Emma's hand stilled on his chest. What if I want to be? Silas pulled back to look at her. Then you're more foolish than I thought. But there was something almost tender in the way he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. They didn't speak of it again that day. Work through evening chores and careful silence. But that night when Emma retired to the bed, Silas didn't take his bedroll by the fire. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dying flames. I sleep better knowing you're safe, he said. That's all this is. Emma didn't argue. He stretched out beside her, fully clothed on top of the blankets. The bed was narrow and they didn't touch, but Emma was acutely aware of every breath he took. Sometime in the night, she woke to find his arm had come around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His face was buried in her hair and he was muttering something in his sleep. Nightmares again. Emma turned carefully in his arms and placed her hand against his chest over his heart. You're safe, she whispered. I'm here. The muttering stopped. His breathing evened, and Emma realized with a jolt that terrified her. She was falling for this dangerous, damaged man. Days blurred into weeks. Shooting practice every morning. Emma's aim improved slowly. She could hit 5 cans out of 10 now. Silas taught her to load faster, to shoot from different positions. One afternoon he brought out a knife. Guns can fail. Jam, run empty. You need a backup. He showed her where to strike to disable an opponent. Throat, kidneys, femoral artery, clinical and brutal. Emma practiced on a straw dummy he'd rigged up. It felt wrong thinking about stabbing someone, but Silas's voice was relentless. Hesitation gets you killed. If someone's close enough for a knife, they mean to hurt you. Don't give them the chance. Emma thrust the blade into the dummy's gut, twisted like he'd shown her. Good, Silas said. Again, by the end, her arms shook from exertion, but the movement had become almost automatic. That night they sat by the fire drinking coffee spiked with whiskey from Silas's hidden stash. Why are you doing this? Emma asked. Teaching me to fight, Silas stared into the flames. Because when Cain comes, and he will come, I need to know you can survive. Emma's blood chilled. You're planning to leave. It wasn't a question. Silas nodded slowly. When he gets close enough to be a threat, I'll draw him away. He wants me, not you. Emma set down her cup with a sharp click, and I just stay here, wait to see if you come back. Silas looked at her, his eyes reflecting fire light. You live, that's all that matters. Emma stood abruptly. That's not your choice to make. Silas rose too, towering over her. Yes, it is. I brought you here. I'm responsible for keeping you alive. Emma's hands clenched into fists. I'm not some possession you need to protect. I'm what? Silas's voice was harsh. My partner, my woman. You think a few weeks changes what I am. Emma stepped closer, tilting her head back to meet his gaze. No, but it changes what I am. For a long moment they stood locked in silent battle. Then Silas's hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. You scare me, he said quietly. More than Cain, more than dying. Emma turned her face into his palm. Good, now you know how I feel. His kiss was different this time. Still intense but less desperate, as if he was memorizing her. Emma's hand slid up into his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, Silas rested his forehead against hers. If I'm staying, Emma whispered, then teach me everything. Make me strong enough that you don't have to worry. Silas closed his eyes. I'll always worry, but when he opened them again there was determination there. But I'll teach you everything I know. And so began Emma's real education. Silas was a brutal teacher. He showed her how to track game, how to read weather, how to survive alone in the wilderness. He taught her to ride hard and fast, to think 3 steps ahead, to use her opponent's strength against them. Some days Emma hated him for pushing so hard, but slowly she began to change. Her hands grew calloused and strong. Her aim became deadly. She stopped flinching at violence. One morning, Silas came to wake her and found Emma already dressed, gun loaded, watching the window. "Heard something," she said quietly. Silas moved to stand beside her, rifle ready. They waited in tense silence. Finally, a coyote emerged from the trees, nosing around the chicken coop. Silas relaxed, but Emma kept watching until the animal left. He looked at her with something new in his eyes. "Respect, you're ready," he said. Emma met his gaze steadily. "For what?" Silas's expression darkened. "For what's coming." And Emma knew with cold certainty that their time of peace was ending. Cain was close. The reckoning was coming. The message came 3 days later. Emma found it nailed to the barn door when she went to feed the horses at dawn. A piece of paper yellowed and creased with words scrolled in dark ink that might have been blood. "I know where you are, Silas. Time to pay what's owed." No signature, none needed. Emma's hands trembled as she carried it to the cabin. Silas was making coffee, his back to the door. She set the paper on the table without a word. He turned, saw her face, and went still. Then he picked up the note and read it slowly. His expression didn't change, but Emma saw his knuckles go white around the paper. "How close?" she asked. Silas crumpled the note in his fist. "Close enough to leave this. Could be watching right now." Emma moved to the window, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved except wind through branches. "What do we do?" Silas was already strapping on his gun belt, checking his rifle. "We fortify, board up windows. We don't need stock ammunition. Fill every container with water." He looked at her, his eyes hard. "And you stay inside. No matter what happens, you stay inside until I tell you different." Emma's jaw tightened. "We're past that. I can shoot now. I can help." Silas crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders hard enough to bruise. "You're hurting me," Emma gasped, but didn't try to pull away. Silas's face was inches from hers, fury and fear warring in his expression. "Good. Remember that hurt. Remember how easy it is for someone stronger to break you. Cain's men are killers, Emma. They'll do worse than hurt if they get their hands on you." He released her, stepping back. "You stay inside. That's an order." Emma rubbed her shoulders, anger flaring hot in her chest. "I'm not your soldier." Silas grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. "No, but you're mine to protect whether you like it or not." He left before she could respond, the door slamming behind him. Emma stood trembling, torn between fury and fear. He was right that she was outmatched, but he was also wrong if he thought she'd cower inside while he faced Cain alone. She spent the morning preparing anyway, checked her revolver, made sure every chamber was loaded, filled the rifle Silas had given her, practiced sighting out the window, pulled furniture away from walls to create cover, filled buckets with water and set them around the cabin. If Cain's men came, she'd be ready. Silas returned at midday with armfuls of split logs. He began nailing them across the windows, leaving only small gaps to shoot through. Emma worked beside him without asking, holding boards while he hammered. They moved in grim silence, both understanding what these preparations meant. By evening, the cabin looked like a fortress. 3 windows boarded, the 4th left partially open, facing the front approach. Silas had positioned chairs and overturned tables as barricades, creating defensive positions throughout the single room. He checked every nail, every board, his movements methodical and precise. Emma watched him work and saw not the man who'd kissed her, but the outlaw he'd been. Efficient, deadly, utterly focused. When darkness fell, Silas finally stopped. He sat at the table, cleaning his guns with practiced ease. Emma made coffee and they drank in silence, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Emma couldn't bear it anymore. "Tell me about Cain." Silas's hand still on the rifle. "Why?" Emma sat across from him. "Because if I'm going to die here, I deserve to know why." Silas sat down the cleaning rag, his jaw working. "Cain was the closest thing I had to family after my parents died. Took me in when I was 16, taught me to shoot, to rob, to survive. I owed him everything." He paused, staring at nothing. "The gang was 7 of us. We hit banks, stages, payroll trains. Got rich doing it. I thought we had rules, no killing unless necessary, no hurting innocents. I believed Cain felt the same." His voice went flat, emotionless. "Then we hit a town called Blessed Creek. Bank job supposed to be simple, but the sheriff fought back and Kane shot him. Then his deputy, then anyone who looked at us wrong. By the time it was over, 9 people were dead. 3 of them children caught in crossfire. Emma's breath caught. Silas continued, his eyes haunted. I tried to stop it, got knocked cold for my trouble. When I came to, Kane had torched the bank to cover evidence. The whole block burned. Emma reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Silas didn't pull away. I left that night, took my share of the money, rode until the horse dropped, then walked until I found this place, changed my name, tried to forget. He finally looked at her and Emma saw the guilt eating him alive. But Kane don't forget. To him, I'm a traitor and traitors suffer before they die. Emma's thumb stroked across his scarred knuckles. He'll have to go through me first. Silas's expression cracked, something raw breaking through. That's what I'm afraid of. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare into darkness. I've killed men, Emma, more than I can count, but the thought of Kane's hands on you. His voice broke. Emma went to him, pressing against his back, her arms coming around his waist. Then we kill him first. Silas turned in her embrace, tilting her chin up. You say it's so easy, like taking a life don't change you. Emma met his gaze steadily. I'm already changed. You did that and I'm grateful. Silas's thumb brushed her lip, the one he'd split with his kiss weeks ago. It had healed, but the memory remained. I've never been gentle, he said quietly. Don't know how. Force is all I have left. Emma turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there. Then teach me to be hard, too. Make me someone Kane fears. That night they didn't sleep. Silas told her everything. How to recognize an ambush, where to aim for quick kills, what to do if taken prisoner. His voice was clinical, but his hands shook when he checked her gun for the 12th time. Emma absorbed it all. Understanding this was his way of showing love. Not soft words or gentle touches, but brutal honesty and deadly skills. When dawn finally came, they were as ready as they'd ever be. The attack came at noon. Emma was checking the perimeter when she heard hoofbeats. 3 riders cresting the hill, moving fast. She sprinted for the cabin, shouting warning. Silas was already at the window, rifle raised. Get down. Emma dropped behind an overturned table as the first shots shattered the remaining window glass. Bullets thudded into walls, sending splinters flying. Silas returned fire, precise and deadly. 1 rider fell. Emma crawled to her position, raised her revolver through the gap in the boarded window and fired. Her shot went wide, but the second clipped a horse's leg. The animal screamed and went down, throwing its rider. 2 left. Silas was reloading when one of them reached the door. It exploded inward, the bolt torn free. A man burst through, gun raised. Emma fired without thinking. The bullet took him in the chest. He looked surprised, almost offended, then collapsed. Emma stared at his body, the blood spreading across the floor. She'd killed him. Actually killed a man. Her stomach churned. Emma. Silas's shout snapped her back. The 3rd rider was at the window trying to climb through. Emma swung her gun around and fired twice. Both shots hit. The man fell back with a cry. Silence crashed down. Silas moved carefully to the door, rifle ready, checking for more attackers. Emma remained frozen, staring at the dead man 3 feet away. She could see his face, younger than she'd expected, with red hair and freckles. He might have been handsome once. Emma. Silas's hand on her shoulder made her flinch. Look at me. She turned and he cupped her face. You did good, you survived. Emma's voice came out small. I killed him. Silas nodded. Yes. And if you hadn't, he'd have killed you, then me. That's how this works. Emma wanted to cry, to vomit, to scream. But she did none of those things. Silas was right. This was survival, raw and ugly. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. How many more? She asked. Silas's expression was grim. Kane rode with 7. 3 are dead now. That leaves 4 plus Kane himself. Emma reloaded her gun with shaking hands. So we wait for them to come again. Silas dragged the bodies outside, checked the perimeter, then barricaded the door with furniture. Night fell and they sat in darkness, afraid to light a lamp. Emma's nerves screamed with every sound. Wind in the trees, an owl hooting, the settling of timbers. Silas sat beside her, one hand on his rifle, the other holding hers. I'm sorry, he said finally. Sorry I brought this on you. Emma squeezed his fingers. You gave me a home when I had nothing. Whatever happens now, I don't regret it. Silas was silent for a long moment. Then when this is over, if we survive, I want you to go back east. Take the money I've got buried under the barn. Start over somewhere safe. Emma stiffened. No. Silas turned to face her in the darkness. Emma, she cut him off. No, I'm not leaving. We survived together, or not at all. His grip tightened almost painfully. You stubborn, foolish woman, but there was something like admiration in his voice. Emma leaned against him, exhaustion finally catching up. Tell me something good, something before all this. Silas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then I had a dog once. Before Cain, before everything. Named him Bear because he was tiny and it was funny. He followed me everywhere, slept at my feet. His voice softened with memory. When my parents died, cholera took them both in a